Hello and welcome to your last video for chapter 17, where we will discuss section 17.9 on the endocrine pancreas and 17.10. So we'll start off with our pancreas. Its location is posterior and inferior to the stomach. The stomach has been removed in this figure here. And what's unique about the pancreas is that it has both endocrine and exocrine abilities. Exocrine meaning that we have a duct system, and endocrine because it releases hormones. So if we look at the tissues within the pancreas, we can see that we have three different types of cells. We have our alpha cells that produce glucagon, our beta cells which produce insulin, and our delta cells that are going to produce somatostatin, which inhibits insulin and glucagon secretion and slows the rates of food absorption and enzyme secretion along the digestive tract. Now we also have our acinar cells here that are the exocrine cells, and their job is to produce enzymes and other digestive chemicals. And you can see some of these chemicals listed over here. We would have our sodium bicarbonate that is added here to the duodenum so it can neutralize the acidic chyme that is coming from the stomach. We have some proteases that help digest proteins, pancreatic amylase that digests carbs, pancreatic lipase which digests lipids, and pancreatic nucleases that will digest nucleic acids. Now let's talk about the homeostasis of blood sugar or blood glucose. We know that insulin and glucagon work as antagonists to maintain the homeostasis of our blood sugar. So let's talk about insulin first. Our insulin is going to help lower our blood glucose levels by enhancing the membrane transport of glucose into our body cells. So we would convert excess glucose to glycogen for the short-term storage, which is a process known as glycogenesis, and into fat for long-term storage in our adipocytes, and this is known as lipogenesis. So in our figure here, we are going to use insulin when we are have hyperglycemia, or we are hyperglycemic. And so what happens is our beta cells produce insulin and releases it. And then we can have our body cells take up glucose from the blood and use it within cellular respiration in our mitochondria. We can, as long as oxygen is present, and then we are going to inhibit our glycogenolysis so that we can remove glucose and create glycogen for our liver. And then we can inhibit our gluconeogenesis. So we have our amino acids and free glycerol that are not converted into glucose within the endoplasmic reticulum, and all of this helps to decrease the concentration of our blood glucose to go back to homeostasis. Now with our glucagon, we're going to release that when we are hypoglycemic, and we have our alpha cells secrete glucagon, and we have these effects that take place. So we can inhibit the body from taking up glucose for cellular respiration. We stimulate the glycogenolysis, and we are going to stimulate the gluconeogenesis. So we take those amino acids and free glycerol now and convert them into glucose in the ER and release it into the blood. And all of this will help increase our blood glucose. Now for section 17.10, we're going to talk about some organs with secondary endocrine functions, starting off with ANP, which is our atrial natriuretic peptide. This literally means producing salty urine. And so what this hormone does when it is synthesized and released from the atrium is to inhibit aldosterone release by our adrenal cortex, right? If you remember, the adrenal cortex is going to release aldosterone, and aldo, think salt resorption. So by inhibiting that, the salt can no longer be resorbed in the blood and gets left in the kidney tubules and will create salty urine. The brain will also secrete BNP, that is the brain natriuretic peptide that performs the same job. Next, we have our GI tract. Here we are going to possess some cells that are deep within the gastric pits in the stomach and also within the pits of our intestines that are going to produce secretin, gastrin, CCK, GIP, VIP, ghrelin, galanin, our neuropeptide Y, and many more. You could see some of those listed along in this figure with their functioning. And it's another organ would be the kidney that is going to secrete a hormone we've already learned about, which is EPO or erythropoietin. And this is for red blood cell production and for renin to activate angiotensin II, which is a potent vasoconstrictor, which will cause an increase in blood pressure. We also have our fat cells, our adipocytes, serving as endocrine structures or endocrine functioning. Our adipocytes release a hormone known as leptin, and following the uptake of glucose and lipids, which gives us our satisfaction of not being hungry anymore. Now let's talk about the thymus gland. This is located posterior to the sternum and between the lungs. And we could see that it kind of lays on top of the heart here, or I should say anterior to the heart. And we see that the thymus is the largest in an infant, and it increases in that size until puberty, and then we are going to see that it shrinks as an individual continues to age. This is because it releases a hormone known as thymosin, and thymosin is going to help us develop our T cells or our T lymphocytes for an immune response. And so as an infant and child, we really want to develop our immune system, but then as we get older, that development of the T cells is present and we no longer need our thymosin to be secreted, so the thymus starts to atrophy or shrink. Now for our liver, this is going to be important for 4 different hormones and 4 hormone precursors that are going to be released. First up is our insulin-like growth factor, also known as somatomedin, and this is going to cause an immediate stimulus for growth within our body, especially within our bones. Then we have our angiotensinogen, which, if you remember, is our precursor to angiotensin I, which is going to increase our blood pressure because it leads to angiotensin II, which causes vasoconstriction, and we know that increases blood pressure. And then we've got our thrombopoietin that stimulates production of our blood platelets. And lastly, our hepcidin, which blocks the release of iron from cells in the body, helping to regulate iron homeostasis in our body fluids. Now, last section is 17.11 on the development and aging of the endocrine system. You can skip this section. Also, there is a lot of pathology that has to do with our endocrine system. We already have a lot of content that we've covered, so I'm going to save a lot of the pathology material for pathophysiology, which you will take in the spring. And so I will post another video recording in case you want to get a preview of what some of those topics are, but it will be supplemental. You won't have to start learning that material just yet.